Okay.
All right, so the recording has begun. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Career Identity Intersections panel today. We're focused today on people of color. And before we get going, I just have a few virtual communal agreements, just so you all know as participants how this will go. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Participants and panelists, if you could mute your microphone. Panelists will be muted while they're not speaking, and then when they're speaking, they'll unmute. Participants, you're welcome to turn your captions on. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a closed captioning button. So if you want to pick up everything that everyone has said and you're able to view them via captions, you can just turn that setting on right now. Participants, you may keep your videos on or off, but our presenter will be using both audio and video today. Some of them will be video and some of them will not. Please ask any of your questions via the chat function. So you'll just click the chat button, you'll go ahead and type your question in, and we'll either prompt it in the moment if it's related to the questions at hand, or we'll save it for the Q&A at the end. We also will be recording this session, and we'll be posting it on the YouTube channel for UNLV Career Services, where you can access this information later. So at this time, I'm actually going to go ahead and transfer moderation over to Zainab, who works at UNLV in the Student Diversity and Social Justice Office. I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves, and then you can take it away, Zainab.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Zainab Sementuela. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am currently the Asian Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and International Program Coordinator within the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice at UNLV. Quick bit about myself. I've been at UNLV since 2015. I've been working with international students and our APIME student population for the duration of that time, along with assisting my other colleagues in my office as well. Prior to that, I was a grad student at NYU, where I got my master's degree in higher education and student affairs, degree in English with a minor in education from UC Berkeley. But you're not really here to talk to me or hear from me, so let me introduce you to our panelists for today. We have Chef Stacy Dugan from Simply Pure. We have Gemma Evangelista from Live Nation. We have Mandy Penn from, Mandy Penn from Teach for America. And we have Jayana Alvarez from Workday. They're going to be answering our moderated questions, and then at around the 45-minute mark or the 50-minute mark, depending on how long some of these questions go, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions as well. Are we ready to get started? Panelists, are you ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. Okay, so to start us off, Chef Stacy, why don't you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory?
Career trajectory, like how I got started, or where we are now. Just give you a brief overview of everything.
Yeah, so a little introduction of yourself as to like what you do, where you work, and then how did you get to where you are? I think the exact question that we have is, what was your career path, or what does your career path look like thus far? Okay. Do you have a mentor? And if yes, what role have they played in your career?
All right, awesome. So I have been a plant-based chef for 20 years. I am, so my name is Stacy. I'm the owner of Simply Pure Vegan Restaurant. We're located inside of downtown Container Park. We've been open about 6.5 years, and we were the second plant-based restaurant to open in Las Vegas. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm actually at the kitchen as we speak, which is one of the reasons why I don't have my camera on, because I don't know if you all want to see us chopping tomatoes and stuff. Maybe you do, I don't know, but so yeah, that's been my career path actually for the past 20 years. I haven't had another job outside of cooking. So here we are today, and we got started in Container Park. I was cooking for Tony Shea. He was at the time the president of the Downtown Project. And so because they were opening Container Park and they were already familiar with me and our food, they asked if we wanted to open up a space inside Container Park when it opened. So we were one of the original tenants. So we've been committed for the past 20 years, but specifically in Las Vegas over the past 6.5 years with the restaurant, really committed to making sure that the Las Vegas population is supplied with healthy plant-based food. Not even Las Vegas, because we get a lot of tourists, of course, being in Container Park. So we've been able to service people all over the world, thank goodness, and introduce people to the beauty and the blessing of plant-based food. So that's basically an overview. As far as mentors, I've had many, of course, but right now, I wouldn't necessarily. I'd have a mentor that I am calling on a consistent basis. I just take different experiences in different, experiences and just different. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, just different things from different people. So, for example, Jay-Z is one of my major mentors. I was on a podcast yesterday, and I was telling the guys that besides my father, Jay-Z is like the second most influential man in my life, just because he taught me the hustle, So it's always different things, different people. I'm very inspired by music because my background is in the music industry before I went into cooking. So that's just to give you a little bit of background of like what we do and where we are now. So I have a 50% business partner in the restaurant. Her name is McKinney, and we have that. We have a food truck. We also have a meal prep service, and we have catering. So we've been pretty busy, thank goodness.
Okay, Gemma, could you also tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us your role, what you do, and then tell us a little bit about your career path in terms of what it's looked like, and if you have any mentors and how have they played in your career.
Sure. So currently I work at Live Nation Entertainment. I'm not sure if everybody knows, but we're best known we're pretty much a promotional company, and we're known for pretty much hosting a lot of shows across the country. We work very closely with Ticketmaster. So for me, I am a buyer. I work specifically for our concerts, venues, and festivals. So part of my job is pretty much trying to evaluate, compare different products and different services that our venues need across the board. A lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis is trying to do creating a cost analysis to determine what best aligns, what product or service best aligns for our venues. Career path-wise, I've been in procurement, or some people like to call it supply chain management, for about 7 years. So this is pretty much what I've known. I've dealt in different industries such as distribution, manufacturing, and even hospitality. I would have to agree with Chef Stacy. I don't really have a mentor, perchance, that I call on career-wise. I do have different people that I look up to as far as who I want to be, or on a personal level. But as far as a career mentor, I don't really have one. I think one that I can think of to put in perspective would be her name is Gigi Roundtree, and she created a nonprofit here in Vegas called Commentary. And for her, I look up to her because she's definitely a woman of color, and she makes me believe that as a woman of color, it's possible to create a successful nonprofit organization within less than 5 years.
All right, Mandy, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then answering the questions that we have right now in terms of career trajectory? So how did you get to where you are? What's that path look like? And do you have a mentor, and what role have they played?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I am Mandy. I go by she, her, hers pronouns, and I am currently a manager of performance analytics at Teach for America. I basically help our recruitment team solve problems and tell stories through data. So kind of a data nerd, really enjoy technology. When I think about my career path, it is very tied to my mentor, who I also see as my sponsor. I first met her when I interned at Teach for America, my sophomore year of college. And she was a manager at the time, similar to my current role. And now she is a vice president at Teach for America. So she's a woman of color and has moved up really quickly in the organization. And I know she's constantly talking behind closed doors about my accolades and helping me to come back and strive for better roles and positions in the organization. But my path wasn't super linear. After interning at Teach for America, I graduated and ultimately went into healthcare consulting because I felt like it was hard to turn down that salary level of consulting, but didn't really love it in the private sector. Felt like I was making rich people richer and kind of lost my why. And so met up with my mentor, and she was getting promoted at the time, starting a new team and looking for someone for that team. And so she brought me back to Teach for America as a recruitment associate, and then moved around a couple times in the nation with my partner. And so transitioned to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to get more experience in education and manage their continuing education programs for the nonprofit education. And so got more experience in faculty management and curriculum development. And with that external experience, was able to reach back out to my mentor at Teach for America and come back to TFA in a promoted role in the midst of a pandemic. I actually started my new role at TFA about 4 weeks ago. So it's been a little crazy. I've been learning a lot, but really value that mentor relationship and the work that I'm doing. I'll pass it on to Jayana.
Thank you, Mandy. So my name is Jayana. I currently work at Workday as a machine learning translator. So what that means is like I translate English data to French and Spanish so that it fits Workday's machine learning models, so that they can then use it for their products for their customers. I just celebrated my 1 year at Workday. So that was right after graduation. So I've only been out of college for about a year. This is my first real job. So that experience has been very valuable to me, and seeing how I can grow into tech despite not having a tech background, coming from languages, which was my degree. As far as mentor, I definitely think my dad was a big mentor, particularly throughout my college years and into this first position in tech. He has been in the industry for over 20 years now, and particularly in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, tech is a huge booming industry, but that changes so rapidly. So having his expertise and his experiences kind of helped prep me for this role and what to expect and how to manage it a little more realistically. So I definitely value his input and his say throughout my career thus far.
Okay, thanks so much. Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry. I have slides in front of me and they got a little mixed up. Here we go. So now that we've talked a little bit about your career trajectory, or your career trajectories, can you all tell me a little bit about employer dynamics? So we have two questions for this. The first one is, how has your identity as a person of color impacted the type of employer you work for? And if so, how? Also, how do you navigate workplace politics? Does your identity as a person of color determine how you show up? And Gemma, this time we'll start with you.
Ooh, nervous. Okay, so to answer the first one, my identity definitely impacts the type of employer that I work for. I definitely do a little bit of research, just like we all do, depending on who is going to hire me. I like to see, is there some kind of diversity? Is there women up there that are part of their leadership team and above? For me, it kind of puts a peace of mind that if I see that, it makes me a little bit more willing to say yes to an offer, or look at them and say, oh, maybe I will go in for that second interview. For me, I like to see like women, and especially women of color, take on leadership roles. And I would like to, and it, for me, it's more of a, I don't know how to explain it. It's like it makes me feel better as far as there's a future there. As a college graduate, that definitely also impacts the type of employer I work for. I know I've definitely had a few instances where they don't even care about the experience, they just care about where you graduated from. And sometimes I'm like, well, if I have all this experience, but all you care about is a piece of paper, it just makes me feel like I'm not enough. And to answer the second question, some of the, sorry, I'm like a little nervous, so apologies. For me, being a woman of color has definitely affected the way that I show up in the workplace. There are times, like depending on the audience, there are times where I feel like I have to either be silent and stay in the background, or times where I have to overexert myself in order to either show that I'm like I am the person that can handle this. You should promote me. Like, I feel like sometimes I have to do double the amount of work in order to show that I'm competent enough versus somebody who has the complete opposite type of identity that I have. Sorry, I hope that answers both of those questions.
I think it does, absolutely. Mandy, how about you? Do you want to go next?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about when I first graduated from college and was working in the private sector and was probably one of 5 women of color in my workplace. And I just felt like I wasn't really able to be my most authentic self or show up in a way that I could show my identity and talk about my identity and talk about how that plays into my work, because most of the people around me didn't look like me or have those lived experiences. And so I think that kind of pushed me to search for another role, specifically in the nonprofit sector, in the social impact sector. And so really happy about my organization now and the spaces it provides to talk about my identity and develop my identity, because I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important in any workplace to share those ideas and grow as an organization, especially with everything going on in the world right now. However, I still think in terms of workplace politics, there is sometimes I feel I guess like a Western dominant culture where I can tend to be more reserved and introverted. I, similar to Gemma, can feel the need to, I guess, like do more work and be louder, because it seems like the louder people get promoted quicker. But I've also learned that I really like data. And so I've been able to show my value in other ways and be able to lay out my outcomes and kind of show what I've done without always preaching my accolades. And I'll pass it on to Chef Stacy.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Here I am. Okay, so you're asking about being a woman of color in the workplace. So fortunately, because I'm the boss, I am a woman of color. I'm not on the camera, but I'm African American, just so you all know. So it's been interesting having a restaurant here in Vegas and being an African American. But I think for me, it's more so because there are not a lot of African Americans who are in the plant-based space, period. So I've been able to be a pioneer in that space. And so as far as it relates to, and I hope I'm answering this question correctly, just if I need to elaborate a little more, please let me know. But For me, it's always been about just representing for my culture and for my community, because we know that African Americans tend to, especially in the lower income neighborhoods, tend to not have access to healthy food. So one of the things that me and my team and my business partner have been very dedicated to is to providing healthy plant-based foods to our community and making sure that we're educating African Americans and people, period, but specifically our community on health-related issues and diet. That's huge. So, and then the second thing is politics. So because I have my own business, I've managed to create a workspace that is void of politics. And I don't know if we're talking about like government politics or we're talking about internal politics, but regardless, we don't really deal with either of those. We're a very open and transparent restaurant and business and company. And the majority of the people that work for us, they just have like an amazing, like I hire people based on attitude and attitude first and personality. And so that tends to help us to weed out a lot of additional politics. I don't really have to deal. Can we cuss on that? No, I probably shouldn't cuss. It's a college thing, huh? Yeah, but we don't have to deal with the BS, if that makes any sense. over the past 6.5 years, it's taken some time to get there, of course, but no, I've been able to create. We have been able to create a workplace where politics don't really have a place. We are very dedicated and focused to what our vision and our goal is, and so that doesn't leave a lot of room for other things, thank goodness.
Okay, and last but not least, can we have Jayana? Can you take a crack at the answers for this question, or these questions actually?
Yeah, I'd love to. I definitely feel that my identity is a big role in where I work. I remember internships in college when I was in Portland, Oregon. Time and time again, I felt I was the only woman of color, and that felt extremely isolating, but also taught me that's not exactly the environment I want to pursue later on. So going to Workday, I was actually extremely fortunate to have a manager who, I'm Asian American and Latino American, and she was also Asian American. So those similarities we had really connected, and that helped me kind of ease into this role in a way that I wasn't expecting. And another thing that I discussed, again, like I said, my dad he's a big mentor for me. We discussed how that's such a rarity to find, particularly in tech here in Silicon Valley, to find yourself represented in a way that you feel comfortable and like you can vocalize what you're feeling and how you think. So for one to enjoy that and appreciate it, but also understand how that can change quickly, or that might not be the case at like the next job I go to. So keeping those things in mind have been very helpful with me to navigate what type of employer I want to work with. And as far as workplace politics, I think I've always found that just vocalizing how I think and where I stand is also really important for me, to not kind of put myself in a box, and if I disagree with something, vocalize it respectfully, but make sure that I'm heard, because more often than not, someone isn't going to give you that space. You kind of have to claim that space for yourself, which is hard. That's not an easy thing to do, but I feel fortunate enough to have had those opportunities that have made it a little more comfortable for me to be able to speak up. So I hope that kind of is on the same lines of that topic.
I would absolutely agree. Thank you so much, everyone. Those have been some great answers. We're going to move on to our next section, which is challenges and support. There are two questions for this as well. So the first question is, what have been some challenges you have faced or are currently facing as it relates to identifying as a person of color? And the second question is, what is something your current employer does well as it relates to diversity and inclusion? This time, Mandy, we will start with you.
Thanks. Sorry, I was trying to click that mute button. So I think just with everything going on in the world right now, it has been a real challenge to be a person of color. And I'm trying to figure out the balance of how do I compartmentalize, but also not compartmentalize, and figure out how to deal with everything going on personally as well as professionally, and also feeling like I'm not doing enough personally, and that causes me not to do enough professionally. And so that's kind of top of mind for me right now, because there are so many layers to everyone's identity, and how that can play in professionally. But I really appreciate being a part of an organization that really values diversity and inclusion. I know my manager has created spaces for us to talk about how we're feeling, as well as just everything that's going on. And we also have affinity spaces at work. And with the nature of the work that Teach for America does, I feel like I'm able to make an impact, and like I am doing something. And our organization actually gave us a day of pause so that we could reflect and be with our communities and our families, and engage in our communities. And so there's been a lot of open communication within our organization, and that's been really good, because I think we're all just feeling a ton of things right now. And I'll pass it on to Gemma.
So for me, I know last week was definitely a hard week. I think some of the challenges that I've faced is probably microaggression. I like, other than that, there's other workplace politics that just cut that on a professional, on a personal level, that have come up that I still have trouble dealing with. Currently, I know Live Nation has definitely lended its support as far as the different types of resources, employee resource groups. But honestly, we had this conversation today with our CEO. It's not enough. There definitely needs to be more invested. And I think we're continually, like, as a company, we're trying to better support like diversity and inclusion, but it's definitely going to take some time and some effort. So. And I will pass it on to Jayana.
Thank you. I guess what I've been witnessing with my team specifically at this time is being able to correct not only ourselves but each other. I can tell that these conflicting topics have been new to a lot of people on my team, and I am appreciative that they've been receptive to different people on our team politely calling them out and pointing out maybe this is a better way to approach how to have these discussions, or how to process our feelings, or maybe think a little more before we just blurt out some answer about, that could come off as insensitive. So I really appreciate that people are making efforts, but also that they can kind of reflect a little more and not just rush to say something that they think is necessary. So that's definitely been, on the one hand, a source of contention recently, but on the other hand, a big growing opportunity, growing into our mistakes and our discomfort. And to have that in a work setting, I think is important too, because it just shows the human side of all of us. And I think that's really important, particularly with my team right now. Yeah, that's about pretty much all I have to say on that point. I'll pass it over to Chef Stacy.
Okay, so some of the challenges we face, being an African American in America, that experience, we could sit here all day and talk about the challenges so I'm not going to go into all of those challenges. But for me in particular, I don't really have a lot of challenges as a person of color. Like, I feel like right now, especially being a person of color and especially a woman during this time, has been more of an advantage. For example, with us, like, we're currently in an era now where a lot of people want to support Black-owned businesses, which is great. And we've definitely benefited from that, just being, people of color, and then women as well. So we've had an increase in business over the past, week and a half. And, but not only that, when people do see that Simply Pure is owned by people of color, a lot of times we get a lot of support just because of that, because again, we are pioneers in the space, and there are not a lot of people of color who are in the, or African Americans specifically, who are in the vegan space. So I don't really have challenges. I just have more blessings when it comes to identifying as a person of color. And then when it comes to employer diversity and inclusion, because I'm the employer, I always make sure that there is diversity and inclusion with women, with other people of other nationalities. One thing I will say, as far as diversity and what's been interesting, as far as being a person of color in this time and an African American, is that I've had a lot of my women friends who are not African American, or who don't deem themselves as minorities, come to me and just ask me questions that normally would not be asked during this time. Perhaps questions about racism, questions about how I'm feeling. One of my employees is a young white girl, young white sister, like to call her. She's a young sister. I love her to pieces. And she has been very open with sharing not only her perspective during this time, but also feeling comfortable enough to come and ask questions about what's happening, and then about how I'm feeling about what's happening. So I think we've done a pretty good job being an employee, me and my business partner being employers, and making sure that people feel comfortable asking questions, not only our employees, but just our circle, period. People who have looked at us from afar and are now coming to ask questions, and then see how they can really help and be a part of the movement. So I see nothing but blessings during this time, especially when it comes to being a person of color. It really just depends on how you look at everything. It depends on your perspective. But we've been able to definitely have conversations about diversity and inclusion even before this time within our workspace at Simply Pure, and certainly now.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're going to move on to our last section, which is advice. So we have 2 questions for this section as well. The first question is a little bit longer, and if you need me to repeat anything, please let me know. While this session may primarily focus on identifying as a person of color, which of your other identities are important when considering your career trajectory? And the second question is, what are some pieces of advice you have with navigating the workforce as it relates to your most important identities? Jana, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, thank you. These are the questions. So I would like to focus actually on my age, as I'm just more or less fresh out of college, pretty new to the workforce. I have found that it's valuable to have a young, new perspective in tech. I think it's not uncommon, but at the same time, there are some expectations that I think that should be managed when entering tech. For instance, contract work is extremely common, and with that comes, a little less stability than some people might hope for. So to not be surprised to have multiple jobs in contract as a contract is, I think, a realistic expectation. In addition to that, also not hearing back from certain companies. It's also very common to essentially get ghosted by a company. It has nothing to do with you. So with that, take into account that it's not personal. None of it is ever personal. It's all more or less budget-based, and people that you have no connection to, that don't even really know you, decide these factors that could influence you, whether you know it or not. So that's a factor that I would that I wish I knew prior, but it's something that I'm learning now. So yeah, as a young person entering the workforce, it's important to not have too high of expectations, but it's hard because you still need to keep trying, keep pushing forward, keep applying. And I would say the biggest advantage is networking is connecting with people you know that you can have a personal connection with, and they can refer you that way. That's been the biggest advantage personally, especially as someone just entering this industry. So those are my like main takeaways from my first year at Workday.
Okay, we'll pass it on to Chef Stacy.
Okay, so as far as my career trajectory and outside of being a person of color, I think for me, the thing that's helped the most is being a spiritual person, a person who I've been able to tap into just another kind of, not only another kind of energy, but I've been able to tap into my instinct in another kind of way that has served that has served me well, especially over the past few months since COVID. So I think that being grounded and being spiritual and just knowing that everything happens exactly the way that it's supposed to, it removes a lot of fear. So I've been able to be fearless in this space. And so when it comes to being a person of color, of course, that to me is important, of course, being a woman, but being connected to God in another kind of way really has helped to push this thing forward. Because I know that I am not working alone, that there are other forces that are helping with all of this. And then some pieces of advice when navigating through the workforces I tell everybody to make sure that you are always following your instinct and listening to yourself, because nobody is going to be able to tell you what's best for your life except you. You know, your employer might tell you what's best, what he or she thinks is best, your parents, whatever. But the thing that has really gotten me the furthest and has made me the happiest is listening to myself and really trusting my instinct and trusting my own guidance. And again, that's tapping into that that other kind of spiritual energy and alignment. And so I meditate a lot. I make sure that I maintain my happiness and my peace. And so I would say everybody's, not just the workforce, but just in your life period, I think that, of course, that advice will carry over to the workforce and make everything in your work life better as well. But just trusting your instinct and being transparent and open have been some of the best things as it relates to me. And those are the advice that I would definitely give to anybody.
Excellent, thank you. Mandy, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about my identity as someone who came from a low-income community and a first-generation college student. When I was graduating college, I said before that I picked a consulting offer over a nonprofit offer because I just couldn't say no to the salary, especially as I was thinking about how I was going to support my mom financially and support my siblings. As the first person in my immediate family to have graduated from college. And so I went into consulting and didn't love it, and actually was crying every morning because I didn't want to go to work because I had lost my why. And I'm happy that I had the experience and I was able to save up some money from that experience. But I guess like transitioning into the pieces of advice, just really looking for an organization that you are able to find your why at the end of every day and you feel like you're making an impact. I feel like all of the other panelists here really love what they do. And I know that that is hard to find, but when thinking of your career trajectory, I think that's something that you should be looking for. I don't think you should stick with something that you know is making you miserable, and really work for an organization that you love and you truly believe in their mission. Another piece of advice when navigating the workforce is, again, to reiterate what Jayana said, networking, building those mentor relationships, finding those sponsors. When I decided to leave Teach for America to work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I didn't burn a bridge when I decided to leave. And they were able to bring me back a year later because I kept those connections and I reached out when I really needed them because I was moving. And I am able to work for an amazing organization and have found my why again. So I'll pass it on to Gemma.
Awesome. So I'm thinking of probably being a college graduate is probably one of the most important, is probably one of the identities that I would resonate with when considering my career trajectory. I don't think I shared this with anybody in the room, but I'm actually a recent college graduate. So all the times that I've been working, I was just going to work and going to school full time. So I know that I would always talk to a lot of executives during like the different companies I used to work for, and a lot of times like they would be really happy and very supportive that I'm going for my degree. But anytime I wanted a higher position, like a managerial position or above, they would kind of question me and be like, well, you don't have that piece of paper. So when you get that piece of paper, then we'll talk. So I would think that's probably one of the most important things. So now that I have this expensive piece of paper, I'm very excited. So now I can kind of use it and be like, okay, well, where's my raise? And where's that new promotion? Where's the new title, manager? So transitioning into pieces of advice, I would say that being a recent college graduate, it just finished. I know that it's really difficult trying to work full time and go to school full time. I mean, honestly, it took me about 10 years because I was working full time. I took a hiatus for like 3 years so that way I could save up and pay for college. And so it's definitely very challenging going to night classes, going to online classes, but I will say putting that investment is definitely worth it. You just have to keep going. There's no timeline. Everybody has their own path. Everybody has their own timeline of what works best for them. So don't let media or things that you see online where it says like the average student needs to graduate in 4 years. That's not true. I think as of last year, it's 5 to 6 years is the average graduate time. And I think another piece of advice, just like the rest of our panelists are saying, as a woman of color operating in corporate life, I think one of the biggest things is to kind of find your support, or a good solid support system for you professionally. I mean, we have solid support on a personal level, I would imagine. So make sure you have that translate in your professional life as well, and that'll definitely open up a lot of doors for you for your career.
Okay. I think that's everything that we have for our moderated questions. So at this point, we can go into our open Q&A. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them into the group chat, and we'll ask our panelists from there. Any questions? Okay. So our first question from the audience is, what do you expect future careers to ask for? Sorry, give me just a second. I'm trying to read this through. What do you expect future careers to ask for diversity and interacting with different diverse communities?
Can I kind of answer my interpretation?
Absolutely.
Okay. From what I understand and what I think and just what I've experienced so far, I think diversity and inclusion are gradually going to become more and more important to companies at a more integral level than they are now. I think many companies maybe just say they believe in these values, but they don't show it. And having that accessible data to prove it, I think really helps back up a company's message. So from what I've just witnessed, I think it's going to become a more obvious goal for a lot of places. And I think that's a good thing.
If I could say, this is Stacy. As far as diversity and inclusion in the workplace and career, well, just from my interpretation of the question too, I think that it's important not just to have diversity just because to have diversity, but also because it's because that's one thing that everybody's saying now, that it's important to have different races and things in your workplace. But the reason why that's so important is because we all come from different backgrounds, different cultures, and we bring different experiences and different things to the table. So when I'm hiring, I love to hire all different races and cultures and backgrounds, because everybody brings something special and individual to the business, and it helps it grow in a more well-rounded way. We're not just looking and making decisions based off of one perspective, but we're making decisions based off of perspectives that come from our employees as well, because we encourage our employees in the workforce to say something. They know that they all have a voice, and we've used their voices a lot of times and implemented those things into our business, and it proved to be beneficial, and that's with all races and cultures. So I highly recommend that if anybody is going to go into any kind of career, that one, you look for a place that does have diversity so that you can get those different experiences and different perspectives. And then if you're looking to start a business, definitely include people of color, or just different people, period, from all different backgrounds, because it's definitely going to make your business more well-rounded. Word.
I completely agree, and also wanted to add that I used to work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is a historically very white, male-dominated organization, and was also able to push for a diversity, equity, and inclusion class that was disseminated to all of the local chambers, their presidents and CEOs, because all of the communities in the US, no matter urban or rural, understand that it's important, not just for the social impact and the community impact, but also for that economic impact, as well as we see the changing demographic landscape of the US as well.
So our next question is, how do you all practice self-care, and what do you do to create work-life boundaries?
I think that's oh, sorry. I think that's an especially good question right now too, with work from home being so common amongst so many people. One thing that I've implemented personally in this stage, at least, is setting like a hard time where I stop work and that's it. I don't answer any more messages, and I understand that's not possible for everyone in each of these different roles. But I think having those time boundaries really helps you distance work from your personal life, especially given that the spaces that we work in right now are not necessarily like separated like normal. So that's been very powerful for me. And then personally, just reading and writing, that's been a really great tool to wind down and kind of get my creative thoughts going, because oftentimes in tech roles, we don't have room for personal creativity. It doesn't always allow for that space. So creating that space for myself has been really beneficial. Go for it, Mandy.
This is Stacy. Oh, someone going?
Oh, no,
wait,
go ahead.
were you finished? I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Okay. So self-care is, I'm glad you asked that question, because it's everything. And it all about tapping into that instinct and just your own guidance system. So for me, self-care I've really been taking the time to make sure that I'm doing that, because as an employer and an entrepreneur, and then I also have a 5-year-old son that I'm currently raising alone right now. So that is, self-care is everything, because I can easily get caught up in the business and then get caught up in taking care of him and forget myself. But it doesn't benefit anybody if I'm not taking care of myself. So self-care is top priority. A few things that I do. One, I enjoy time by myself. I really enjoy music. So honestly, I just sit in my backyard once a day and just make sure I'm getting some sun and that I'm listening to music. And then I also meditate on a daily basis. I'm also a cannabis consumer. I think that the cannabis plant has been extremely helpful for mental illness and for physical pain as well. And so I use that as a form of self-care, whether it's topical or internal. And so it's allowed me to have a lot of facets of the business and continue to grow and expand and raise a child and not go crazy, especially during this time. So whenever it's time for me to turn off, I turn it off. As far as work, when I go home, I turn my phone off after the restaurant is closed. I only schedule meetings during the day. For example, if I usually try not to schedule anything before 10 o'clock. I don't schedule anything after 7:30, just so that I have that time in the morning for myself, and then I have the time in the evening for myself and my son or whatever. But super, super important self-care to everything. Zion, sorry about that. It's my son. So yeah, super important. It's everything. And I tell, if you can't take care of yourself, then your business, be quiet, please. If you're not able to take care of yourself, then your business or whatever you do is going to fall. So you actually have to come first, and then work and everybody else comes second.
And my role was actually remote before everything happened with COVID. So even after everyone starts going back into the office, I'll still be working from home. And completely agree with everything that's been said. I really like to set routines for myself. Like I'll work out at 10 a.m. every day. I'll have my 3 p.m. afternoon snack, just something to look forward to. And then I'll actually block that time off on my calendar, so nobody gets to schedule any meetings over my me time. And so, yeah, completely agree that you need to focus on yourself, or you won't be able to be your best self at work.
Definitely. I think, what is it? Especially when we're on our phones just constantly all the time, right? And I'm sure for everybody here, work is probably connected with the phone. So sometimes it's easier to shut off the phone first and make sure you get the notification, or make sure you shut off any kind of notification. So that way you're just completely it's you time only. To resonate with you, Mandy, I work out in the morning, or make sure I set a certain amount of time that I at least work out in the morning. And then during COVID, I would promise myself that I would take one walk at least with my dog. So that way I could see the nice sunshine and meet other people and just make sure I'm not my mental health isn't taking a total beating. For me, I enjoy the outdoors. So hiking is really important for me. So I have to do some kind of out of breath challenge in order to make myself feel accomplished. And that usually makes me feel a lot better. So.
All right. I actually had a follow-up question to something someone said. I don't remember which of you mentioned it, but a lot of companies do say, we believe, we really support diversity and inclusion. We really, really, it's really important to us. But to you, when you're looking at employers, when you're thinking about hiring employees, what are actionable things that you look for that a company is doing, or that you would suggest that people look for? when trying to identify an employer who really does actually care about diversity and inclusion?
For most companies that I've seen, at least, you can look at the kind of like a chart flow of who, like the hierarchy, more or less, and you can see who is in charge, who are the CEOs, who are the the top people in the company, and you can see if that aligns with how you feel, what you want to work for or not. And I think that's really helpful for that transparency for future employers to see how they can fit. And then on the other end, those companies giving that information so that they attract a more diverse talent pool naturally, in addition to the actual jobs that are listed. So I think that's my way of kind of going about my research of companies, helping me decide if I think I would feel comfortable in that environment.
Yeah, I think I saw on social media recently someone had posted that all companies are posting their diversity statement right now, but really it's important to post like a picture of your board or your C-suite, because that's really reflective of who's running the organization and how diversity has played out in the organization. And another thing I would add is affinity group spaces to be able to talk about your identity in all different respects, and to be able to show up to work and be able to present your identity in that way and know that you are able to have a conversation with other individuals who have those lived experiences.
Gemma, Chef Stacy, would you like to add anything?
I think for me, it's more of a lesson learned. Like I wish I think what would have helped if I would have talked or taken the opportunity to talk to current employees. I know that there were times when during the interview process, they would be like, oh, let me just show you my team, or let me just let you talk with them, or get your, or kind of have a perspective of who's currently working there. And I kind of wish I would have taken the opportunity to probably ask them more about what the company does specifically for diversity and inclusion. There are definitely companies that I worked for in the past where I regret not doing that, because I had a harder conversation about that later on, especially when I was trying to move up in my career. And I think for me, it's just more of a lesson learned. I think if you have the opportunity to talk, if they give you the opportunity to talk to somebody that's currently working there, I would say take the opportunity to have those hard conversations, because it's definitely an elephant in the room that sometimes a lot of companies don't want to address.
I have worked in, well, let me just say this. Before I opened the restaurant, I worked at the Wynn for a couple of years. But honestly, it's a little difficult for me to answer this question, only because all the jobs that I've had, I've never really focused on diversity and inclusion. I have been the only African-American in the room on several occasions. Even when I was working at the Wynn, there would be a lot of times where I was the only African-American in the kitchen, many, many times. But it just never occurred to me to kind of ask about why. I think for me, mostly because I was just focused on my career and what I was doing, that I wasn't even like I didn't even think it was necessary for me to ask why there weren't more people of color in the workspace. But I do feel like if anybody has a job, and if they feel like that's something that is important to them to say something, then to definitely do that and to talk to whoever they feel comfortable speaking with. But for me, I'm just a real big believer in focusing on what it is that you want to see out of your career. And so for me, the reason why I'm not like super fighting for diversity and inclusion is because I don't want to fight for something if someone doesn't want to include me. Like if you don't want to have diversity and inclusion in your workplace, then fine, I don't want to work for you. So I feel like people should just really focus on finding those companies that do that are well versed in diversity and inclusion. But if you do work for a company and they're not, then it's definitely important to say something. But if it doesn't change, then move on and go find something that's more of a better fit. I think that there's so many different career paths and things and opportunities out there, and there are definitely people who do want to include people of color in their workspace and are open to the idea of that and exploring other cultures. And so I just say find your niche and find your tribe.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This was a great conversation. Cassandra, I'm going to pass it back over to you to close it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to first thank all of our panelists for being here today. You all had really unique but similar perspectives, and I appreciate you taking the time today to share all of this information and all of this, all your feedback and all of your experiences with our students and our alumni at UNLV. On the screen, you might see some contact information for both UNLV Career Services and the Student Diversity and Social Justice Office at UNLV. So definitely go ahead and visit our YouTube channel if you want to see this recording or refer it to a friend. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, but if our panelists would like to drop any of their contact information in the chat box now for our students or our alumni to reach you, you're welcome to do so, but no pressure. You certainly don't have to. But again, a special thanks for you all today for being here and for sharing your story. Thank you so much.